It was almost midnight at Martin Family Vintners, our struggling family winery in Oregon. The only light in the office was the cold blue glow of my monitor reflecting off the stacks of invoices I was trying to balance. Payroll was due tomorrow, and I was short. Then an email notification popped up. A charge alert for the company credit card. $6,000. Lake Tahoe Marina. My heart stopped. Before I could even process it, a second email appeared. This one from my father Robert, sent to my mother Karen and my brother Justin. The subject line was just one word: success. The email read, "Deposit successful. The yacht is ready for us." I stared at the screen. $6,000. That was the exact amount I needed to pay our employees in the morning. My name is Megan. I'm 30 years old, and I'm the chief financial officer of this winery. At least that's my title. My real job is the fixer. I'm the one who negotiates with suppliers when our checks bounce. I'm the one who works late nights to figure out how to stretch our credit line just one more week. I'm the one who keeps this entire operation from sinking, while my younger brother Justin lives his life. Justin is 27. He holds the title of marketing director, a position my father created for him. In reality, he spends most of his budget on long lunches and trips he claims are for brand research. He is the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. I was just the one who cleaned up the mess. My fiancé Alex, an independent accountant, had warned me for months. He'd look at the books I showed him in confidence and just shake his head. "Megan, this isn't a business," he'd say gently. "It's a life raft, and your family is drilling holes in it while you bail water." I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe I was helping. My hand was shaking as I picked up the phone and called my mother Karen. She answered on the second ring, her voice already wrapped in that soft, placating tone she always used. "Megan, honey, is something wrong? It's so late." I kept my voice flat. Dad just charged $6,000 to the company card for a yacht deposit. I need that money for payroll. Tomorrow. There was a long sigh on the other end, the sigh of a professional peacemaker. "Oh, Megan," she said, her voice dripping with practiced disappointment, "please don't start this. You know how stressed your father has been, and Justin. He's had such a hard year. He deserves this." "He deserves it," I whispered, staring at the negative balance on my screen. "Mom, the employees deserve to be paid." "It's just money, honey," she said, as if that settled it. "You'll figure it out. You'll fix it. You always do." She hung up, and I just sat there frozen in the silence. She was right about one thing. I always did. That's the curse of being the fixer. You don't start out wanting the job. You're just the one who sees the problem first, the one who steps in because you can't stand to watch things fall apart. You fix one small thing, then another. You become the reliable one, the responsible one. And then one day you wake up and realize that responsibility has become an emotional prison. Your family stops seeing you as a person. They only see you as a function, a safety net. They don't have to be careful because they know you'll be there to catch them. Your entire identity gets wrapped up in holding it all together. You're so terrified of what will happen if you let go. You don't even realize you're the only one holding on. I looked at the screen. I could do it. I could move the money from the bottling budget. It would mean delaying our next shipment, which would put us in default with our biggest distributor, but I could make it work. I could call them in the morning, beg for an extension, promise them anything. I could fix it. But as I sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the empty office, something new and cold settled in my stomach. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. This time, I wasn't going to fix it. This time, I was going to let it break. I picked up the phone, but I didn't call the distributor. I called the bank. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I need to report a fraudulent charge. I slept for 3 hours and woke up with a cold knot in my stomach. But it wasn't fear. It was resolve. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and did exactly what the bank representative told me to do. I filled out the fraud affidavit. I signed my name, scanned it, and sent it. The $6,000 charge from the Lake Tahoe marina was officially disputed. Then I logged into our corporate accounts. I canceled the card. Not just locked it, canceled. I ordered a new one to be delivered only to me, requiring my signature. Finally, I opened my email. I sent a single company-wide internal memo to my father, my mother, and my brother. The subject was UP date, new corporate expense policy. The body was short. Effective immediately, all non-payroll expenditures over $500 require prior written approval from the CFO. All existing company cards have been deactivated. New cards will be issued upon request and review. No exceptions. I hit send. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First, my father, Robert. I let it go to voicemail. 2 seconds later, my mother, Karen. I let that go to voicemail too. Then Justin. Then my father again. I silenced my phone and went about my morning. I made sure payroll was funded. I spoke to our distributors. I did my job. The whole time, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree, vibrating with a silent, frantic rage. That night, I was summoned to the weekly family dinner. The text from my mother simply said, "We are all eating at 7. Be here." It wasn't a request. I walked in at 7:05. The air in the house was thick and heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. They were all there, seated around the heavy oak dining table. My father at the head, my mother to his right, Justin slouching in his usual spot. The food was already on the table, untouched and getting cold. I sat down in my chair. For a full minute, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father Robert spoke first. He didn't yell. He used his low, intimidating CEO voice. "Who do you think you are?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him. "This is my company, Megan," he said, leaning forward. "My name is on the sign. You don't get to lock me out of my own accounts. You don't get to dictate policy to me." "I was saving us," Justin muttered, poking at his food. "It was for team building." I almost laughed. "Team building for who, Justin, you and your friends?" "I've had a hard year," he suddenly yelled, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "I deserved that trip. We all did. You just couldn't stand to see us happy." And then right on cue, my mother Karen started to cry. Not real tears, just the watery, shaky voice kind she used to get her way. "Megan, how could you?" she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "You're tearing this family apart. All this ugliness, just because of one little vacation." I looked at their faces, one by one. My father radiating entitlement. My brother, a black hole of victimhood. My mother, the master of emotional guilt. And I realized something. They weren't angry that I had discovered the theft. They were furious that I had stopped fixing it. They were mad that the safety net had just announced it was no longer going to catch them. The old me would have apologized. The old me would have caved, promised to fix it, to find the money somewhere else. The old me would have done anything to stop my mother's crying and my father's rage. But the old me wasn't sitting at the table anymore. I placed my napkin on the table. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked out of the dining room. I heard my father start to yell my name, but I didn't stop. I walked out the front door and into the cool night air, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't look back. Walking away was one thing. Staying away was another. The following week was a special kind of hell. My phone was a constant barrage of voicemails. My father, Robert, left messages that sounded like legal threats, all bluster and indignation. My mother, Karen, left sobbing messages about how I was breaking her heart and destroying the family legacy. Justin just sent a single text. "You ruined everything." I ignored it all. I blocked their numbers. I had to. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what to do next. I had a wine conference in San Francisco that I was supposed to skip to save money. I booked the flight immediately. I told Alex I needed to get out of town, and he just nodded his eyes, full of a sad understanding. "Go," he said. "Don't check your email. Just go." For 2 days, it almost worked. I was surrounded by people who loved wine, who spoke about soil and tannins and weather patterns. It was professional. It was sane. I sat in seminars. I took notes. I let the normalcy wash over me, trying to forget the rot I had left back home in Oregon. I slept in a crisp, clean hotel bed, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream about spreadsheets bleeding red ink. Then at 2:17 in the morning on the second night my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but it was an Oregon area code. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought, it's Mom using a friend's phone. It's Dad calling from the office. I let it ring, squeezing my eyes shut. It rang again immediately. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, flooded my system. I sat up and answered. "Hello. Are you Megan Martin, CFO of Martin Family Vintners?" The voice was male, official, and tired. "Yes. Yes, I am. What's wrong?" "Ma'am, this is Officer Davies with the Oregon State Police. We have your brother Justin Martin in custody." My blood went cold. "Is he okay? What happened?" "He's stable," the officer said, and that one word told me everything. He was involved in a single vehicle accident tonight. He's been arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence. I closed my eyes, the hotel room spinning slowly. Okay. He's in custody. That's not the only reason I'm calling, ma'am, Officer Davies continued, and his voice lost its clinical edge. The vehicle he was driving was a company truck registered to your winery. He totaled it, and when we arrived at the scene, the entire back of the truck was loaded with cases of wine. About 20 cases looks like high-end stuff. I couldn't breathe. What? He'd broken the lock on your loading bay. The vehicle was full of stolen product, ma'am. He was pretty forthcoming about it. Said he was going to sell it to a private buyer tonight. 20 cases. He had stolen 20 cases of our premium Pinot Noir. The one wine we actually made a profit on. The wine I was counting on to pay our debts for the next quarter. The officer was still talking. The truck is totaled, like I said. It's at the impound lot. But the bigger problem is the insurance, since your brother, an employee, was committing a felony, specifically theft and a DUI. At the time of the crash, your corporate insurance policy is almost certainly null and void. The silence in the room was absolute. I wasn't just short on payroll anymore. I was facing the total loss of a vehicle, the loss of over $50,000 in premium inventory, and the legal nightmare of my brother, the marketing director, being arrested for felony theft and a DUI, all in a company vehicle. This wasn't a hole I could dig us out of. This wasn't something I could fix. This was the end. Justin hadn't just driven a truck off the road. He had driven the entire company off a cliff. "Ma'am, Are you still there?" the officer asked. I finally found my voice. It came out as a whisper, dead and hollow. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'm here. I called Alex from the airport terminal in San Francisco, my voice sounding thin and distant. I'm on the next flight home. It's worse than we thought." "I'll meet you at the winery," he said. "No questions, just support." We spent the next 48 hours in the office, fueled by stale coffee and a grim, silent dread. Alex, with his accountant's brain, was methodical. If Justin was stealing wine, he wasn't doing it in a vacuum, he said, pulling binders from the shelves. And if he has gambling debts, this $6,000 boat was just the tip of the iceberg. We were running an emergency audit, a deep dive into every invoice, every shipping manifest, every bank transfer for the last 2 years. I handled the official books, the ones I kept meticulously. Alex handled everything else. He found it on the second day. Tucked inside a box of my father's old tax returns from the 90s, there was a simple black spiral-bound notebook. It wasn't an official ledger. It was the kind of notebook you buy at a drugstore for $2. Alex opened it and just stared. "Megan," he said, his voice quiet, "I think you need to see this." I walked over. It was my father's handwriting. Columns of numbers, dates, and simple 2-word descriptions. Batch 12, adjustment, seller overstock, sale, private event, cash. It made no sense. These sales didn't match any of our invoices. The adjustments were for thousands of gallons of wine that hadn't simply vanished. And then I saw the other side of the ledger. The expenses column. J, marker, 4,000. J, Vegas, 8,000. J, online, 3,000. J, Justin. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What is this?" Alex pointed to the adjustment lines. "He's watering down the wine, Megan. Your father. He's been diluting the lower-end batches, stretching them, and selling the extra inventory off books for cash." I looked at the numbers. It was true. He was ruining our reputation, turning our wine into cheap swill, committing actual criminal fraud. And for what? I looked back at Justin's column. The numbers were staggering. It wasn't 1 or 2 bad bets. It was a constant, desperate bleed. He had gambling debts totaling over $90,000. My father wasn't just a bad CEO. He was an accomplice. He and my mother, Karen, were actively destroying the company I was killing myself to save, all to pay for my brother's secret addiction. I sat down, the black ledger open in my lap. It all became so clear. The constant stress, the hard year Justin was having, the frantic need for that $6,000 vacation. It was all a lie, a cover for this. And in that moment, sitting in the dusty office, I finally understood. In the twisted psychology of my family, there were 2 roles, and they were set in stone. Justin was the golden child. He was the one who was meant to be brilliant, to be charming, the one who carried the family name. He was allowed to fail, allowed to make mistakes, allowed to be reckless, and they would do anything to protect that image, even if it meant committing fraud, even if it meant destroying everything. And I was the scapegoat. I was the one who was competent, the one who was responsible, and therefore I was the one who had to bear the burden of everyone else's sins. My job wasn't to succeed. My job was to clean up. They didn't resent me for being smart. They counted on it. They needed my competence to enable their dysfunction. They were willing to risk jail time, to dilute the wine that had my grandfather's name on it all, to protect the golden child. And they expected me, the scapegoat, to just keep fixing it, to keep patching the holes in a ship they were actively sinking. I looked at Alex. He had his hand over his mouth, his eyes full of a pained rage on my behalf. I closed the black notebook. The sound of the cover shutting was soft, but in the quiet room it sounded as final as a gavel. "Megan, what are you going to do?" Alex asked. I stood up and picked up my phone. "I'm going to do what a real CFO does," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I'm calling a board meeting." The main conference room at Martin Family Vintners is all dark wood and old money, a room designed to impress distributors and hide problems. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I called an emergency board meeting. It was a very small board. Me as CFO, my father Robert as CEO, my mother Karen as well as his wife, and my brother Justin, who was out on bail, his arm in a sling from the crash, looking pale and sullen. And one other person, my great-aunt Susan. Aunt Susan was my grandfather's sister and a small, silent shareholder. She lived quietly, rarely came to the winery, and my father had always treated her as a negligible, senile annoyance. But she was still on the board, and I had called her personally. I sat at one end of the long polished table. Alex sat behind me in a chair against the wall, acting as my legal counsel and accountant. He had a stack of files and 2 laptops. My family sat clustered at the other end, Robert, Karen, and Justin, a united front of denial. "This is ridiculous, Megan," my father started, his voice booming in the quiet room. "Calling an emergency meeting. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed this family." "Good morning," I said, my voice cutting through his. It was flat, devoid of emotion. I opened my laptop and the projector on the ceiling whirred to life, illuminating the white screen behind me. "I called this meeting to present a financial overview and restructuring plan," I said. "As of this morning, Martin Family Vintners is facing total insolvency." Robert laughed, a short barking sound. "Insolvency. Don't be dramatic. We're having a difficult quarter." Last week I continued ignoring him. Justin Martin took a company vehicle without authorization, committing felony theft, and was subsequently arrested for DUI. I clicked a button. A photo of the totaled company truck appeared on the screen, followed by the police report number. Aunt Susan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My mother Karen shot me a look of pure hatred. "The truck, valued at $40,000, is a total loss," I said. "Our insurance has denied the claim due to the criminal activity involved. The 20 cases of premium Pinot Noir valued at $52,000 were also lost. Total immediate loss, $92,000. My father started, his face turning purple. I didn't let him finish. I clicked to the next slide. It was a scanned page from his black ledger. Furthermore, an audit has revealed a secondary off-book accounting system. I pointed to the lines. For the last 2 years, you, Robert, and you, Karen, have been systematically committing commercial fraud. Fraud Karen whispered, her face white. Watering down batches of our entry-level wine to create off-book inventory, which you then sold for cash. I clicked again. The other side of the ledger appeared, all of which was used to pay over $90,000 in gambling debts for Justin. The silence in the room was absolute. Aunt Susan looked like she was going to faint. As a result, I said, my voice echoing slightly, the bank has been notified of the fraud. Our primary business loan is in default. They will be seizing the assets within 30 days. The company is finished. And then the room exploded. It wasn't at me. It was at each other. "Gambling," Robert roared, turning on Justin. $90,000. You told me it was 20. You told me that was the end of it, you useless. "Me," Justin shrieked. jumping to his feet. "You're blaming me who was the one watering down the wine, who was the one skimming cash. You were the one who took out that harvest loan last spring for a harvest we didn't even have." "You ungrateful brat," my father yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "I have covered for you your entire life. I built this for you." "You built nothing," Justin screamed back, his face inches from my father's. "You just ran Grandpa's company into the ground." And through it all, my mother Karen just started sobbing. But this time her tears were real, a horrible wailing sound of self-pity. She turned to me, her face blotchy and ruined. "Look what you've done," she cried, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Look what you've done, Megan. You did this. You ruined us. You've destroyed your family." I watched them, the golden child screaming at the patriarch, the father lunging at his son, the mother weeping, blaming the only person who had tried to hold it all together. I thought I would feel angry. I thought I would feel triumphant. I felt nothing, just tired. It was like watching a building I had spent my entire life trying to save finally collapse into rubble, and I was just relieved I wasn't inside it anymore. Aunt Susan, pale and trembling, looked at me, not at them, at me. "Megan," she said, her voice thin but clear, "what do you need?" I looked at the chaos, at the three of them screaming and crying, a tableau of greed and denial. I looked at the spreadsheets on my laptop, the numbers that no longer mattered. I realized I didn't want to fix this. I didn't want to restructure. I didn't want to save anything in this room. I quietly closed my laptop. The click was almost inaudible under the shouting. "Nothing, Aunt Susan," I said. "I don't need anything." I stood up. Alex stood with me. I didn't look at my family. I just turned, walked out of the conference room, and for the last time, I shut the door on their mess. The collapse happened faster than I could have imagined. Without me there to fix the books, to move money between accounts, to beg and plead with suppliers, the entire house of cards fell apart in less than a week. When I walked out of that boardroom, I didn't just take my laptop. I took the keys to the kingdom. I was the only one who knew the passwords, the timelines, the complex web of lies that kept the winery afloat. The bank, alerted by the internal fraud report I had filed, found the discrepancies in less than 24 hours. Aunt Susan, armed with the evidence from the black ledger, filed an emergency lawsuit against my father and mother for gross mismanagement and shareholder fraud. Martin Family Vintners was forced into immediate bankruptcy and liquidation. I watched it all from a distance, like you watch a storm rage over a town you no longer live in. The bank seized the property, the vineyards, the bottling line, the tasting room. All of it went up for auction. My father Robert and my mother Karen lost everything. The company, the house that was tied to the company's loans, and the reputation they had hidden behind for 30 years. The local paper ran a small story about the fraud. They were humiliated. Justin, my brother, is facing multiple criminal charges. The DUI, the felony theft, and now commercial fraud. His hard year is about to get a whole lot harder. And me. I took a job at Alex's accounting firm. We're getting married next spring. My new title is Forensic Accountant Specializing in Winery Audits. It turns out I'm very, very good at finding the rot hidden beneath the vines. For years I kept a secret notebook of my own. I called it The Scapegoat's Ledger. It wasn't a financial book. It was an emotional one. Every time my father blamed me for a bad quarter, every time my mother manipulated me into giving up a weekend, every time Justin borrowed money he never intended to repay, I wrote it down. Every lie, every broken promise, every bit of resentment. It was pages long, full of meticulous, angry proof of what they owed me. I kept it, I think, because I thought one day I would show it to them. I thought one day I could read it out loud and they would finally understand. Last week, Alex and I were sitting by the fireplace in our new apartment. I pulled that notebook out from the bottom of a box. I looked at the pages, at all that carefully recorded pain, and I realized I didn't need it anymore. They would never understand, and I no longer needed them to. I tossed the book into the flames. We watched the pages curl and turn to ash. There's a freedom in realizing you are no longer defined by the people who refuse to see you. For so long I believed that love meant carrying the weight of my family, that I had to let them use my strength to cover their weaknesses. We think that cutting ties with toxic family is a betrayal, but sometimes it's the only way to be loyal to yourself. Letting go of the blood you share is the only way to find the family you choose, and the person you were always meant to be. I spent my whole life being the fixer, patching up the broken structures they left behind. Now I'm an architect. I'm building my own life on my own terms from the ground up. And this time, the foundation is solid. The collapse happened faster than I could have imagined. Without me there to fix the books, to move money between accounts, to beg and plead with suppliers, the entire house of cards fell apart in less than a week. When I walked out of that boardroom, I didn't just take my laptop. I took the keys to the kingdom. I was the only one who knew the passwords, the timelines, the complex web of lies that kept the winery afloat. The bank, alerted by the internal fraud report I had filed, found the discrepancies in less than 24 hours. Aunt Susan, armed with the evidence from the Black Ledger, filed an emergency lawsuit against my father and mother for gross mismanagement and shareholder fraud. Martin Family Vintners was forced into immediate bankruptcy and liquidation. I watched it all from a distance, like you watch a storm rage over a town you no longer live in. The bank seized the property, the vineyards, the bottling line, the tasting room, all of it went up for auction. My father Robert and my mother Karen lost everything. The company, the house that was tied to the company's loans, and the reputation they had hidden behind for 30 years. The local paper ran a small story about the fraud. They were humiliated. Justin, my brother, is facing multiple criminal charges. The DUI, the felony theft, and now commercial fraud. His hard year is about to get a whole lot harder. And me. I took a job at Alex's accounting firm. We're getting married next spring. My new title is Forensic Accountant, specializing in winery audits. It turns out I'm very, very good at finding the rot hidden beneath the vines. For years I kept a secret notebook of my own. I called it the Scapegoat's Ledger. It wasn't a financial book. It was an emotional one. Every time my father blamed me for a bad quarter, every time my mother manipulated me into giving up a weekend, every time Justin borrowed money he never intended to repay, I wrote it down. Every lie, every broken promise, every bit of resentment. It was pages long, full of meticulous, angry proof of what they owed me. I kept it, I think, because I thought one day I would show it to them. I thought one day I could read it out loud and they would finally understand. Last week, Alex and I were sitting by the fireplace in our new apartment. I pulled that notebook out from the bottom of a box. I looked at the pages, at all that carefully recorded pain, and I realized I didn't need it anymore. They would never understand, and I no longer needed them to. I tossed the book into the flames. We watched the pages curl and turn to ash. There's a freedom in realizing you are no longer defined by the people who refuse to see you. For so long I believed that love meant carrying the weight of my family, that I had to let them use my strength to cover their weaknesses. We think that cutting ties with toxic family is a betrayal, but sometimes it's the only way to be loyal to yourself. Letting go of the blood you share is the only way to find the family you choose and the person you were always meant to be. I spent my whole life being the fixer patching up the broken structures they left behind. Now I'm an architect. I'm building my own life on my own terms from the ground up. And this time, the foundation is solid.